children! I'm back! Once again, your every fantastic terror from the four-color funny pages is here for you to behold. And because we are rising again, let us start the festivities off with another story of the dead rising for a purpose. The Crow.
It is said that when someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. But sometimes the soul brings with it such a sadness that it cannot rest. And sometimes the crow can take the soul back to put the wrong things right. This is the story of Eric, a poet of sorts who 1 year previously was murdered along with his girlfriend Shelley when their car broke down. The two were to be married soon and had even bought a house together that they were fixing up. Their love was almost disgustingly, comically sweet and saccharine, depicted in the pages as absolutely perfect. Then again, when your final memories are of seeing the person you love be hurt, wouldn't you try to only remember the good times? The crow in the story refers both to Eric and the creature that serves as his familiar. It gives him advice, mocks him in some cases, and yet in others tries to protect him so that he does not have to yet again see the horrors of Shelley's end. In the movie version, Eric painted his face white and put on black lipstick, but in the original comic, it is uncertain if he did that or if he simply has it because of his supernatural nature. Either way, he makes quite the clown, does he not? He's good with jokes, too! The men responsible for his and Shelley's death are hunted down one by one and killed by Eric. Thanks to being undead, he is impervious to harm. Stab him, and he'll just pull the knife out and offer it back for you to try again. Eric also quotes poetry or sayings related to love and death, or makes some of his own. Looking back on it 20 plus years later, one could say this was pretentious, simply another sign of the dark age of comics that loved to overwrite things with purple prose. But this story is beautiful, my children, determined above all else to make us know how much he loved Shelley and how much her death pains him so. The lowlifes who killed her are already dead. They simply don't realize it yet. And they barter for their lives with chemicals and money, utterly incapable of understanding that the only thing that will satisfy him is their blood.
If the devil comes for your soul, my children, do you think you have anything more valuable to trade instead?
The sins of those he comes to kill are between them and God, but Eric has allies in heaven and comrades in hell. May God grant them the mercy that he cannot. But do not think that Eric has only revenge in his heart, for without his humanity, the revenge would be hollow. He encourages people to have a nice day and to care for the things they have, because life is so important to keep. He befriends a young girl, Sherry, so closely named with his beloved. He gives her Shelley's wedding ring on a necklace and promises her that someday all things will be fair and there will be wonderful surprises. Even after all he has experienced, he still believes that. Also, cats seem to follow him around for some reason. I don't quite get that myself.
Ah, the crow, rising again after being separated from she that he loves. I cannot help but identify with him, and I don't just mean with our complexion. You see, I have been away from my children for far too long. Greetings, my children! It is time for us to once again venture into the land of spooky spirals and twisted tales of terror. It is time for Volume 2 of Uzumaki.
And of course, the first tale is only a little scary, more thanks to the artistic talents of Junji Ito than the story itself. Jack in the Box tells the tale of a disturbed little man obsessed with surprise and jumping out at things. He wants Kyrie to be his girlfriend, because it will apparently shock people to see such a pretty girl associated with him. And admittedly, yeah, that would be rather surprising for this little idiot who decides to prove his love by stopping a car with his own body. And said body ends up very mangled after a Jack-in-the-Box starts taunting Kyrie.
And really, I think the evil town may have been having an off day with that one.
She and her boyfriend Shuichi deal with the corpse by wanting to strike it like a vampire.
Yeah, my children, we will be seeing plenty of vampires before this month is over, and I can assure you that most vampires do not act like this dumbass.
But his corpse is feeling a bit bouncy. I hear Linkara did this one for a live show, but frankly, who the hell cares about Linkara, am I right? Then there is the story of the snail. No, not that one! This one. A boy named Katayama is very slow to get to school. Not that anyone's in any particular hurry to see him, considering he keeps making this face. But what's worse is that a spiral pattern starts showing on his back. And it begins to grow on his back as it takes him longer and longer to reach school. Until finally, he's crawling to school like... Well, I think the title kind of gives it away, doesn't it? It's quite a sight, isn't it? In fact, it's eye-popping. But what's even sicker is what happens to the poor boy who taunted Katayama the snail. Following that is the Black Lighthouse. The lighthouse on the cape of Kurozu-cho starts emitting a twirling light all over the town, and anyone who looks at it can feel that this light is wrong and it makes them dizzy. One night, while people are looking at the lighthouse intently, they get a bright flash of light from it. And people suddenly begin twirling in circles while they travel. And poor Kyrie's brother is very interested in the Black Lighthouse and what is contained within it.
Remember, my children, you are not always safe in the light.
Next is the story of mosquitoes. While in the hospital recovering from the lighthouse incident, Kyrie witnesses the mosquito population booming and forming columns in their swarms. They say such columns are made of male mosquitoes trying to mate. And how interesting that pregnant women begin showing up at the hospital with thousands of mosquito bites. And people in the hospital are found with their blood drained. Then we have the umbilical cord story, my children. Well, I don't want to give away everything, but let's just say that the pregnant women in the mosquitoes were only the beginning. And the mushrooms. And finally there is the storm. A hurricane is coming to Kurozu-cho, and when Kyrie goes out to deliver food to her precious boyfriend, the eye of the hurricane turns its gaze upon her. It wants her.
Some of the stories in Volume 2 are not as good as the first, but the ones that are, well, they take up the slack even more so. Remember to eat your mushrooms, kids! Especially when they're as soft as a newborn babe. my children! You know, when you stop and think about it, the capes and costume crowd are really kind of insane. And when you mix in the supernatural, the insane becomes downright monstrous. How fortunate then that monster-kind has a champion, Frankenstein.
And yes, my children, this monster's name is most definitely Frankenstein, after the doctor who created him. He works for SHADE, the Superhuman Advanced Defense Executive. For decades now, they have guarded the world from threats most abnormal to it. But the world is changing, my children. For you see, this is a comic launched in the wake of the New 52 reboot, where superheroes began appearing only in recent years. As such, they have had to evolve their methods and fight bigger and weirder threats with bigger and weirder concoctions of their own. In the inaugural volume, Frankenstein is called in from his vacation on Mars to handle an invasion from another world by hellish beings from another planet. Or is it a planet? Well, that's something for you to figure out when you read. The point is that an army of creatures is spawning forth from a lake, killing everything in their path. SHADE sends in the bride, or Lady Frankenstein, the four-armed ex-wife of our Frankenstein, to deal with it, but they lose contact with her. With the situation growing worse, Frankenstein himself enters the fray with a new team, the Creature Commandos. Among their numbers are loyal soldier Griffith, who has been transformed into a werewolf, the snarky Velcoro, who has become a vampire, the brilliant Dr. Nina Mazursky, who has become amphibious and is responsible for the creation of the commandos, and finally the mysterious Talis, a mummy with unknown abilities, who serves as team medic and is supposedly hundreds, if not thousands of years old. The commandos fight their way through the town, even discovering that some wary, foolish humans had been sacrificing children for years to the lake in hopes of keeping the monsters at bay.
Personally, I would have just, moved to a different town, but I'm practical like that.
At the lake, they travel through a portal to a world overrun by the monsters, who go from world to world, conquering for the sake of conquering. This is no menace to be negotiated with. It is kill the monsters, or the earth is doomed. And thus the mad scientists of SHADE begin their work of readying weapons against them, while the creature commandos find themselves face to face with three mountainous titans that rule the invading monsters. How can they ever fight such beings? Well, fortunately, they have Frankenstein on their side. Frankenstein knows no fear. Frankenstein shall never yield. Frankenstein invites beasts to bear their fangs, so that he may gladly pull them from their foul maws.
There is more to this little tribe collection, but I think I will let what else happens be discovered with your own eyes, my children. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must go slay a beast far worse and more monstrous than what Frankenstein fought. A tax collector. For the Longbox! Greetings from the land of dreams and nightmares, my children. Thomas Ligotti is a somewhat reclusive horror writer whose work tends to follow along the lines of our beloved H.P. Lovecraft. And in 2007, my children, several of his tales were adapted to a book of sequential scares. This is the Nightmare Factory.
The first tale is called The Last Feast of Harlequin. So many out there say that clowns terrify them, but if you were to look at the history of the clown, the jester, Well, they have various roles in different cultures and different times, not only as the disturbing figure meant to bring comedic joy to the little ones. Many times they were also seen as subjects of pity and melancholy, particularly if they were simply deformed individuals labeled as clowns or freaks. And thus we have the story of an anthropologist studying clowns in modern society, and the little town of Miraka. In Miraka, during the winter season, they have a festival where clowns are somehow involved, yet everything about the festival seems very vague. When our protagonist investigates the appearance of his old professor in the town, he discovers that the freaks and the clowns are not always what they appear to be.
But don't worry about that main character, my children. After all, he is one of them. He has always been one of them.
Our next tale is Dream of a Mannequin, and I have to admit, my children, I don't entirely get it. The artwork comes to us from Ben Templesmith of 30 Days of Night fame and Silent Hill Dying Inside infamy, and I must admit he does a good job here. It helps that much of the story is centered around dreams, so the hazy colors and half-finished pencils contribute to a surreal atmosphere that does work for the story. What I do not get is, well, the point of this story. It is from the letters of a psychiatrist who has recently interviewed a woman who has been having nightmares relating to working at a clothing store with mannequins. And yes, there is the standard twist of, oh, she was a mannequin the whole time, Twilight Zone stuff. But that is not the end of the story. It seems to be more about the nature of dolls and the fears of the psychiatrist himself and his relationship to a fellow psychiatrist, and how his own dreams are encouraging him to give in and become a doll like the others. And yet, my children, I cannot say that I hate this story, for you see, the nightmares they have echoed my own when I was alive, of a dark, imposing figure standing behind me, of being unable to turn and look at it, of another dark figure watching in the shadows.
Why do I bring this up? I cannot say. Why do things happen as they do in dreams?
Third up is Dr. Locrian's Asylum. The madhouse, the sanitarium, the asylum. All are words that bring to mind the image of the insane, the mad, the broken. There is a general unease about such places because they contain what we could become, regular people who are no longer quite right. It is not glamorous nor fantastic. It is merely haunting. And for this little town, the local sanitarium, abandoned for decades, has been nothing but an eyesore, disturbing the otherwise perfect horizon line. And so they have finally come to demolish it and raise the graveyard beside it. And yet, its destruction does not bring them the peace they sought. The good Mr. Locrian tells a local bookshop owner who had led the charge against the asylum of what his grandfather had sought to do with the place, and how the destruction of that eyesore has let everything inside of it out.
And what point did he have in coming and telling the bookstore owner all this? Well, that's easy. He came to see if his books had arrived.
Our final story from the factory is Teatro Grotesco. Like the dream of a mannequin, I admit I do not quite understand what exactly the titular teatro is. I get that it is a story about a group that takes artists and strips away their desire to do artistic things, but I'm afraid I cannot exactly figure out how or why they do such things. One could read a simple demonic origin in the teatro in one one of the segments, or possibly just how a cruel world will sap away the desire to create art, but that seems too easy an answer. But whatever that answer is, for the artist who serves as our narrator in this tale, he has a decision of his own to make.
The Nightmare Factory is as sophisticated as it is terrifying. Highly recommended, my children. Especially if you want stuff to haunt your own nightmares. Hello once again, my children. It is said that one should take care when fighting monsters, lest ye become a monster yourself. Oh, how true such a sentiment is. What, don't you believe me? Then perhaps you should ask your old hero, Batman.
On the streets of Gotham City, there has been a string of murders. Poor people who have had their throats torn out by some individual. One night, Batman believes he has found the creature responsible. A woman with fangs. A woman who can move faster than her build suggests. And who effortlessly disappears when cornered in an alleyway. And on top of that, Bruce Wayne dreams of mist rolling into his bedroom and forming into a woman who goes for his neck. It's all real, of course. A woman, Tanya, long ago was changed by Dracula himself to be his consort and monster to feast upon the living in immortal bloodlust. However, she eventually recalled her humanity and fled Dracula, developing a serum to sate her bloodlust and form a group to fight against Dracula. And now Dracula has come to Gotham to build a monument to his evil, an army of vampires that the world has never seen before. Tanya, in turn, has brought her group to fight against Dracula, but unfortunately, since they have all spawned from Dracula, they are slave to his will and thus cannot fight him directly. How convenient, then, that there should happen to be a bat-themed superhero in town who already works at night. It is a good Elseworld story, my children, though it does make you scratch your head at more than one point. For example, Batman takes it very much in stride that this woman is transforming him into a half-breed vampire, able to walk in sunlight but gaining the wings, strength, and enhanced senses of a vampire. He doesn't care at all, and in fact seems to enjoy the advantages that it grants him. His only fear being that if he becomes a vampire, will that make him evil? However, the recurring theme of the story is vampires are real, but not all of them are evil. And thus, while red rain falls upon the city, Batman and the others opposing Dracula wage their war upon the monster, sacrificing their safety, their lives, and indeed the identity of Bruce Wayne. Yes, Batman must lure the army of Dracula to the Batcave and collapse Wayne Manor entirely, exposing the entirety of the Batcave to sunlight and destroying the army of bloodsuckers. Batman is safe himself, of course, to rescue Commissioner Gordon from Dracula on leather wings, while Dracula himself has turned the bats against their former ally. While Batman succeeds in his goal, Dracula manages to bite the caped crusader before he is impaled on a wooden stake. And thus the infection fully spreads to Batman, making him a fully fledged vampire. What becomes of the vampiric Batman? Well, that is explored in Batman Bloodstorm and Batman Crimson Mist. But those are tales for another night.
Batman and Dracula Red Rain is nothing short of what it promises. Gothic scenery depicting the Dark Knight against the King of Vampires. And Batman embracing the monster that he truly is. Hello, my children. And if you've seen the title of today's little tale from the Longbox, you should know that this one is all about you. It's all about children. Undead children.
Children of the Grave comes to us from Tom Waltz, writer of the good Silent Hill comics, and even Silent Hill Downpour. But here is a bit of a different story, for it is not only a tale of the supernatural, but also a war story. 3 United States Special Forces agents called Team Orphan have been sent into the fictional Middle Eastern country of Stinwan to take out the rogue Colonel Akbar Hassan, a terrorist devoted to massacring the entire population of people called the Killapanese. Hassan is most especially known for the attempted genocide of Killapanese children, reasoning that slaughtering the children meant that there would be no enemies to face in the future. However, the soldiers, as they begin their hunt for Hassan, come across a mass graveyard for children. However, there are no bodies to be found. Hundreds of graves are empty. While we learn more about Hassan's own hateful background and how evil a person he is, we also learn the backstories of the soldiers and how they all have lost their families or made tragic mistakes that ended in death for the innocent. It haunts their minds, just as the children haunt their leader, Lieutenant Drake. He continues to see images of dead children who tell him they need his help for justice against Hassan. Coming across a village that is being destroyed by a platoon of Hassan soldiers, Team Orphan manages to dispatch all but one of the enemy. Why did they miss that one? Because Lieutenant Drake ordered them to spare him upon the instruction of the children. The three's friendship and loyalty are tested as the lieutenant continues to be erratic in his decisions, leading to a confrontation with Hassan himself and his remaining forces. Just as the children had planned it to be. And while they are fighting Hassan's troops, they are also battling their own fears. And their demons come back to let them know it's okay to let them go. Children of the Grave can be seen more as a war story than horror, but it is very well crafted. The characters feel real, and we see the side of horror that is not often put forth in macabre delights. The horror of war. Mainly it is because even I, a patron of death, knows that there is nothing good about such things. There is not a darkness that can be enjoyed. All that can be done is to hope that such hell will not visit people in the future. That being said, there is quite a bit of joy to be found in zombie children rising from the sand. For revenge, for vengeance, for justice.
Children of the Grave is dramatic and well told. A story of ghosts and the dead. And the things we carry with us. No laughter today, my children. Just my smile and my own hope that you find yourselves in peace. Well, okay, a little laughter, but only because tomorrow we're doing something more fun than this kind of heavy story. Oh, my children, believe it or not, even your old pal Moarte can get bored with the same old tropes. Werewolves and vampires fighting each other. Why can't they come up with something new to put a twist on it? How fortunate, then, that we have werewolves on the moon versus vampires!
This is a story, my children, where the tongue is planted firmly within the cheek, and scraping against fangs, be they from the undead or from the furry friends. A clan of vampires that happens to be living on the moon in their mobile techno-organic castle are preparing to launch an all-out invasion of Moonbase Alpha. Their leader, Till, has chosen the head of security at the Moonbase, Maggie Pilgrim, to be his bride. Maggie unknowingly has a history with the vampires. Her father fought them years ago, and she believes him to be dead, though in reality, he is in a mental asylum back on Earth. The plans are interrupted by the arrival of 3 werewolves from Earth who are here to create a little havoc and have some fun. They even turn several more people into werewolves before they are sealed up by Miss Pilgrim. However, the vampires launch their attack, and thus the werewolves must join forces with the humans of the Moonbase to fend off the undead. Surprisingly, despite them affirming several times in the story that vampires and werewolves are not believed to be real, everybody seems to take it in stride that these creatures are very real and very dangerous. Anyway, the meat of the story lies in how not seriously it takes itself. A lot of the humor tends to focus around the werewolves and making dog jokes and puns. Sometimes it is funny and other times it is not, though personally I've always found the gory bits to be funny on their own. And I don't mean that in a humorous way, my children, but rather that it's just so fun. And that's really the important part. This is a story that is fun. You've got werewolves carrying around decapitated vampire heads and proclaiming they rock. You have Greg, with 2 G's, Till's servant, who is clearly much smarter and determined than him, having to endure indignities and menial tasks for his master. And you have battles between 2 supernatural forces to help save the world. And, the moon. Hell, even the ending teases the possibility of yet another supernatural force entering the mix. Mayan moon mummies!
Ha! I told you, my children, that the day of the mummy was coming. Mummies on the moon! Hello, my children! Yes, once again, we dip our feet into the capes and costume crowd. We've seen the supernatural heroes, of course, but how do such heroes, especially young ones, cope with horror when it confronts them head on?
If you've been watching that show featuring the guy with the stupid hat, you've noticed that this year he's all about the Teen Titans. Well, here is an annual issue from the pages of the incarnation of the team from the mid-90s. Massacre at Lost Junction. The Teen Titans, after a storyline in their happy little book, are emerging from another dimension, but their jet is quickly in the process of crashing in Canada, partially thanks to a storm over the area that seems to want to punish the town of Lost Junction. Thinking that there might be a plane that crashed, the townsfolk, who are apparently Southerners despite being in Canada, send a party to investigate and, after a brief scuffle, invite the Teen Titans into town to make repairs to their jet and see if they can get help. Unfortunately, the storm has already knocked out the phone lines, but the townspeople offer them a warm bed and a hot meal by Polly, the finest cook north of Kansas. The town really seems to like its cats, my children.
Can't stand them myself, though. Not because of allergies or anything, but because the meat is too gamey.
Giotto is suspicious of the situation, especially since he's been reading a lot of Stephen King books lately. But the others seem perfectly okay with everything, though everyone but Risk is not exactly wild about this soup. In the middle of the night, Argent wakes up to find the cats all over her bedroom. And when Risk has a premonition that Prism is in danger, he gets up only to find all the other bedrooms filled with cats too. He goes down to the kitchen to get a late night snack and clear his nerves, but finds Polly there instead, who recognizes his real name. And then stuffs a cat into a blender.
Horrific, yes, but damn impressive. You ever tried to get a cat to do something it doesn't want to do? The thing turns into like an out-of-control slinky or something.
It seems the inn they're staying at just happens to be some kind of carnival funhouse, since Risk drops down onto a slide that drops him into the bowels of the building, with lots of cat skeletons. Meanwhile, the other Titans investigate the history of the town, how a group of settlers headed out west in 1962, but ended up trapped in the mountains when winter hit early. Caleb Driscoll, an ancestor of Cody Driscoll, aka Risk, only managed to get them in deeper into the mountains. With the winter hitting harder than ever, they set up a shanty town in the hopes of making it through winter. But soon they ran out of food and livestock and horses to eat. And so a witch in the caravan named Polly convinced everyone that the only way they'd survive would be to eat people. The group is reunited and they try to escape, but they really should not have eaten the soup. But then again, it's not like the cats are very happy about the situation either. Nor the long dead. How do the Titans survive this? Well, my children, I don't want to spoil everything. Best to keep the meat fresh.
Remember, my children, to always watch what you eat. Hello, my children. Zombie plagues are a common idea in horror, no matter what medium it is. We have plenty of them in comics. But how often do we have a zombie crossover between franchises that normally would not even have zombies? Behold, the infestation.
This infestation is a very unique sort of zombie plague. The plague itself is known as the Undermind, a collective intelligence that infects the living. It hungers for flesh, biting and spreading the plague to new bodies. The Undermind takes the bodies and minds of those that it infects, gaining their knowledge and intelligence. If that wasn't bad enough, though, the Undermind is composed of technology as well. Yes, my children, this is a zombie plague that can spread to machines and robots. It begins in the pages of the original series CVO, Covert Vampire Operations, where a military base in New Mexico has opened up a dimensional portal to a world overrun by the Undermind. It quickly begins spreading as the forces of CVO go in and try to destroy the portal and keep them from spreading further. However, the infection soon gets into CVO's headquarters and even to a vampiric magician named Britt. Using her magics, she works to spread the Undermind into whole new worlds. Fortunately, they are able to stop her and cut off their world from the Undermind's influence. However, they are too late to stop it from spreading to 4 other universes. The universes of Star Trek, the Transformers, Ghostbusters, and G.I. Joe.
Yes, my children, your childhood fandoms have become nightmares.
Segments of Britt's consciousness are transferred as well, meaning that she manifests in the worlds in different ways, but still under the control of the Undermind. Volume 1 shows what happened in the worlds of Transformers and G.I. Joe. For the Transformers, Galvatron accidentally comes across debris from infected machines, and far too late realizes the threat that has befallen him. His ship crashes on Earth, where he attempts to form an alliance with the Autobots to fight the zombie humans and robots. Unfortunately, because of his ego, he demands that the Autobots swear allegiance to him in the alliance, and the Autobots naturally refuse. But the danger is far worse than that, since Britt, now in the consciousness of a Decepticon, attempts to use her techno-magic to open a portal to Cybertron's beginnings and try to spread the Undermind to all Transformers in history. And in the G.I. Joe universe, the Joes discovered some infected technology, and it apparently overran their base before they were able to stop it from spreading. Some of the low-ranking Joes were sent out to dispose of the technology, remaining only in a robotic arm, but the forces of Cobra come across their boat and take them prisoner, the Baroness instructing her scientific team to discover the secrets of the arm, while they interrogate the Joes. And all too quickly, an overeager scientist hoping for cybernetic enhancements to allow herself to walk again, unleashes the technological plague and infects the base, taking possession of the robots they had been developing, forcing the remaining G.I. Joe officer and the Cobra officers to join together and try to stop the plague before it spreads to the entire world.
Volume 1 of Infestation sets the ground for the plague and all the terrors that it could unleash. Beware, my children! Even this video may have spread the undermind to you! I rise once again, my children! And today we look at a strange sort of superhero. Well, I cannot really call him a hero, for you see, he is slave to whoever holds the mystical pendant. This is the tale of Simon Garth, the zombie.
Tales of the Zombie was a brief horror anthology series made in 1973 to 1975. The title character found his roots originally in another Marvel horror title, Menace, that had been made to compete with the EC comics of the 1950s. And reprinted in Marvel Essentials Tales of the Zombie, we learn the story of poor Simon Garth. He was a domineering and controlling businessman who disrespected the people around him and demanded their obedience, whether it was his employees, his business partner, his gardener, or even his daughter.
Oh, his young daughter, who clearly is far too young to take responsibility for herself. I mean, she's a mere child of 23.
Simon discovers his daughter skinny dipping and the gardener, Gyps, attempting to coerce her for favors. Simon fires him immediately. Gyps swears revenge and joins forces with a voodoo cult to sacrifice him. However, it turns out the voodoo priestess is his own secretary, who had been pining for the jerk. She helps him escape, but Gyps tracks him down and murders them, proceeding to order the cult to resurrect him as a zombie slave, controlled through an amulet that Simon's corpse wears with a twin in Gyps's possession. However, when Gyps orders the zombie to kidnap his daughter, there is enough left of his soul to disobey and kill Gyps. He then buries himself back in the swamp.
He may be a murderous zombie, but at least he knows how to tidy up when he's done.
The amulet falls into the hands of his daughter and then a mugger, both unwittingly summoning the zombie. It is important to remember that this sort of zombie is of the mystical sort, so a bullet to the brain is useless in stopping such a creature. He even gets stabbed to show his invulnerability. And finally, he shoots the mugger with his own gun, before returning once more to his grave. And that was just the start of Simon's journey, which continues even into modern times. However, as I said, this is an anthology, and the other stories are, well, kind of offensive in some ways. For example, there is the story of Ironhead, about a criminal who joins forces with two treasure hunters. He murders them for the deep-sea treasure by blowing up their boat and escaping in a diving suit. However, he comes across African natives who believe him to be an iron-headed god. So yeah, tribal Africans worshipping a white man as a god. Not a good sign. However, don't think he gets to enjoy his godhood, for he realizes that if he takes off his helmet in order to eat or drink, they will kill him for his deception. And there is always someone near him, watching. There is also a brief Frankenstein-esque story about a mad doctor trying to create the most intelligent and powerful being. But of course, don't expect someone who has more power to obey someone less so. And going back to zombies, there is of course the thing from the bog. This one's a bit convoluted, but it has all the thrills and terrors we would hope for. Okay, so a witch who was almost murdered by Christians makes a pact with Satan and kills her own would-be murderers. She then rescues a young child and raises him with her dark powers, making him swear to resurrect the undead from the bog, should she fail to do so. Which she does. He was in turn rescued by some jerk family who wants to destroy the bogmen they know are in the swamp. He does the ritual and resurrects the bogmen, but has a change of heart at the last second. When the bogmen attack, well, let's just say his stepfather really should try to listen before he goes and wastes bullets on what he thinks will stop such creatures.
The tale of Simon Garth, the zombie, could be seen as a tragic one, my children. But then again, he wasn't exactly the nicest man in life, was he? So don't knock the undead life till you've tried it. Greetings from the dead end, my children. It's time for us to mix and match genres a bit in this tale of crime and corruption with mummies, vampires, and witches. This is Frankenstein Mobster.
This is the story of Terry Todd. And Terry Todd, his daughter. A little backstory is in order. In this world, ghosts and goblins and all those fun things are real, but nobody really appreciates them. In this world, monsters are an immigrant minority group, supposedly taking away all the jobs and spice from the normal people, so they get stuffed into the dead end of Monstrous City. And no, nobody quite recognizes the irony of their city name, and are ignored by the police, taken advantage of by the criminals, and the monsters themselves are just normal people trying to make a living in the land of opportunity. Well, I say living, but a lot of these people are quite dead. And police detective Terry Todd has now joined them in death. He was killed by a group of mobsters as he was investigating the missing monsters case and got a little too close to the action. Poor Terry Todd was the only cop that the monsters respected because he actually treated them like people. And now his daughter, Terry, is all grown up and has followed in her father's footsteps. She is the youngest woman to make detective in the department, and she gets to work investigating her father's murder and helping out the monsters of Dead End.
But wait! Isn't there supposed to be a Frankenstein somewhere in here?
Ah, but you see, poor dead Terry Todd is not quite finished. Dr. Salva, scientist and daughter of a witch, has crafted a new weapon for the mobsters of the city. Frankie, the affectionately named Frankenstein's monster, out of the body of Terry Todd and 3 other dead mobsters. The lightning that gives birth to this creature draws the souls of all 4 men into this body, all seeking to take control of it. But thankfully, Terry Todd, whose brain was particularly used, is in control over the others. Dr. Salva has an agenda of her own, however, for while the mob thinks that Frankie was created to be their undead agent, she plans to use him to destroy the Mafia, who she believes murdered her dear mother. But of course, there's still a lot to do along the way, as all of these forces clash with Mayor Hyde, secret boss of Monstrosity's mob, who has his own plans to finally rid the city of the monsters that he, as a racist piece of crap, wishes to utterly destroy. We meet all sorts of colorful types along the way, like Osmed the mummy cabbie, who only wants to raise his family in peace, or Fang Goom, the sea monster who lives off of Lovecraft Street in the bay, sucking up barnacles while speaking as the well-educated being that he is. Will Terry be reunited with her patchwork father? Will Mayor Hyde face justice for his many, many crimes? And what is the secret behind the missing monsters case?
Well, you'll have to read the book to find out, my children. Frankenstein Mobster is a glorious mixture of crime drama and horror. So check it out, if only to see Frankenstein's monster wielding a Tommy gun! Hello, my children! We often are so concerned during this month with the tiny terrors that will attack us on a personal level, but we often miss the fact that monsters can be giants.
Kill All Monsters is a story about giant monsters fighting giant robots.
And if you think that premise is more fun than terrifying, well, it is, but I think you forget, the monsters part of it.
It seems the world is a bit of a post-apocalyptic landscape. Although this is an alternate history, since the first monsters attacked in 1954, and the world was overrun by monsters. And I spoke too soon, my children, for you see, there are human-sized monsters in this world as well. Anyway, in Paris, a group of pilots defeats several of the giant creatures, even breaking off half the Eiffel Tower to impale one. Unfortunately, the battle has taken its toll on their machines, and 2 of them are unable to fly. While the human pilots leave their machines to investigate the ruins of Paris.
Oh, now I get the title!
The military that constructed the giant robots is working on their latest project, Archer, a giant robot, who is very much a robot. Yes, he does not have a pilot and has his own artificial intelligence. And while the pilots sneer at the idea of a thinking killer robot, it seems that Archer himself is a bit more childlike in his demeanor. Excitable, a bit naive, and just generally wanting to make friends with the humans while also getting his chance to fight the monsters. The pilots find themselves some new monsters to deal with. Giant bipedal boars that shrug off bullets. They meet a tribe of humans living in the sewers of Paris, but also discover an abandoned laboratory that could only have been abandoned a few weeks ago. Searching the hard drives, they discover a strange symbol and a name, Pax Monstrorum. Can our heroic pilots survive against the new monsters who will be moving into Paris? What are the abominations that roam the streets of the city? And what is the Pax Monstrorum?
If you're a fan of Pacific Rim, Kill All Monsters is a must, my children. Giant monsters, giant robots, good characters, and a lot of fun. And lots of buildings being used as weapons against big creatures. Greetings, my children! Horror is often paired with the action genre, since combating the supernatural sometimes requires getting a bit modern in your approaches. But perhaps one of the greatest examples of balancing action and horror comes from the pages of the manga Hellsing.
The Helsing organization is England's, and in particular the Protestant Church's, secret force for combating threats of a supernatural element. If there is a vampire priest who is killing off members of his congregation, Helsing is called in. If there is a pair of lovers slaughtering families in an attempt to gain immortality, Helsing is called in. And I have no more effective an agent than Alucard, a powerful vampire who has allied himself with humanity, swearing fealty in particular to Sir Integra Helsing, she who runs the organization. But how to fight vampires in this modern age, my children? Of course, you should still take out the heart or the head, but it takes a bit more effort to try to drive stakes into things, you know. Especially when your opponents have superior strength, senses, and reflexes. And a gun could never kill a vampire. Well, an ordinary gun anyway. Thank the Longbox then that Alucard has his own special weapon. Its ammunition being 13mm explosive steel rounds alloyed with silver melted from a Lanchester Cathedral cross. Alucard is no ordinary vampire, though, as you will see when he is confronted by the Vatican's own special agent against the supernatural, Anderson the Paladin. During a battle with the aforementioned vampire priest, Alucard rescues a woman named Ceres Victoria, but she is dying from her wounds. Inflicted by Alucard himself, admittedly. They have a complicated relationship, as evidenced by the fact that Alucard offers her a chance to keep on living by making her a vampire as well. By doing so, she joins the organization and must learn about her new vampire abilities and what it means to possess such a bloodlust. They affectionately fail to refer to her by name and simply call her the police girl. She's a hoot. Also, she's got a gun. I have heard that ladies are fans of large guns, particularly if they are cannons, though don't take my word for it. The first volume of Helsing gives us a glimpse into what this world is like, with religious factions almost at each other's throats, vampires emerging in greater numbers than ever before, and not caring for the human lives they consume to feed their bloodlust. The simple police trying to cope with situations they didn't believe in the day before, and a vampire who kills the creatures of the night with a grin on his face and a gun in his hand.
Helsing is as exciting as it is frightening. Come for the vampires and Nazis. Yes, Nazis too. Stay for the guns and characters. Still though, the name Alucard, there is something familiar about it. Almost like if you made it backwards. By the Longbox! Nilbog is goblin spelled backwards! Holy crap! I bid you welcome, my children. Last year, the Longbox gave us an anthology comic hosted by none other than Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi. And I am happy to inform you, my children, that this year has kindly given us 2 more issues. Let's see what happens in issue 3.
As Bela Lugosi shows Nosferina his dungeon with comic book artists illustrating tales for his book, we have him tell us the story of The Last Survivor. This is the story of the last human being alive. He has barricaded himself in his home, which he has turned into a fortress. He has done his best to fend off those who have been afflicted by the plague, but his supplies are dwindling, and he must go into town to retrieve more. But is this the realm of those afflicted by the plague? Is he truly the last survivor? Or can he just not accept the world as it is now? Next we have the story of the Mummy's Ring. And like most mummy stories, it revolves around a tale of love long ago. A woman's great-grandfather discovered the tomb of Prince Amon of Egypt, who long ago forged a wedding ring for a servant girl that he loved. However, his father, the pharaoh, disapproved of the blasphemous union and had the servant girl executed and the bloody wedding ring handed back to the prince. In retaliation, Amon forged an alliance with Egypt's jealous Eben gods to destroy the pharaoh and his entire dynasty. And now the mummy rises to seek out his love once again. Our third tale is second to one, a fairly straightforward kind of story that you'd see in the likes of Tales from the Crypt. Paul Walker, a marathon runner, continues to come up second next to famed runner Ross Lazar for the 10th straight year. Paul, jealous of his rival's success, plots to finally eliminate the competition. But poor Paul should take care to not look back while he runs, lest he see his sins coming up to catch him. Or else he may never reach the finish line. Next is Those Crazy Kids on Vlad 7. It's not very good, my children. Basically, some astronauts in very silly-looking purple suits are investigating an alien world with their cat lady in a bikini and come across bones with fangs in the skulls. They are on a world with vampire bacteria, and the final twist is that it starts changing them. That's pretty much it, aside from a very lame vampire attack. Rather disappointing. Still on the following page is a prose story that is much better, written by none other than Jonathan Michael Sparks, the great-grandson of Bela Lugosi himself. And finally, like the last issue we covered, there is a humorous tale of Dr. Vornoff and Lobo as he goes on a night to try to obtain fresh subjects for their experiments. Unfortunately, he could have probably picked a better time to do it.
Bela Lugosi's Tales from the Grave continues its work of granting new anthology stories of horror and intrigue to those who enjoy such fiendish delights. But until the next issue, my children, you will watch the Longbox and despair. Greetings from beyond the grave, my children. Today, the Longbox lets us dip once again into the finest in illustrated horror. I hope you're sitting comfortably, for once again, we gaze into the fetid abyss of creepy.
We're skipping ahead a few issues from last year's Creepy number 9, but the terrors are just as freshly enjoyed. First up is the story of dear Uncle Mangus, an evil old sinner who died after cheating a town out of a lot of its money. And now his poor widow Leona cries over his grave that she shall never know where he hid the money, until she hears his voice answering back to her anyway. And even their nephew is curious about the money. But don't worry, Uncle Mangus will make sure the family gets their due. Next up is a little story of fishing. two boys, after having caught a nice juicy catfish, begin to take it home so that their family will have itself a nice meal that isn't beans. However, while passing by a creepy old house, they notice a light in the cellar and decide to investigate, discovering a beautiful, friendly fairy. How sweet! But remember, my children, the best fisherman always knows what bait to use. After a humorous little cartoon about role models, we have a story about local talent. A film crew in the Philippines is trying to shoot a low-budget monster movie, but the actors keep walking off set for one reason or another. The latest was their makeup artist, who takes the monster costume with him. Fortunately, their liaison with the government is more than happy to give them a local star who does his own makeup. And oh my, does he take direction well! Then I encourage you, my children, to get into the spirit of the thing. A great pun if ever I heard one. A shadowy form loudly enters an apartment building and storms his way into a room, creating quite a ruckus and a struggle. When the other tenants investigate, they find a poor man near death who demands that they do not turn on the light, as he tells them a story of mental projection, hypnosis, and a man who stole his body. After another little jaunt with the creepy family, we end with Pack Leader. In the ending days of World War II, an army team has crashed into the side of a snowy mountain with only one survivor named Carmelo. He was looking forward to getting home, even turning in his weapon against the advice of his captain. But the captain was a career military man who kept his sidearm with him. And it is the only thing that is keeping Carmelo alive, as a pack of wolves stalk him, and the bodies of his comrades looking for an easy meal. If only Carmelo could defeat the dark leader of their pack, maybe he could make it back home. Easier said than done.
Creepy number 12 has more stories of gruesome demises to satisfy the macabre tendencies in us all. Who knows? Perhaps someday I will grace the pages of a comic, narrating the same kind of stuff as dear Uncle Creepy. Welcome to your one-stop for ghoulish delights, my children. You could say that I am something of a businessman, bringing to you what you all desire, as long as you spend your time with your friend Moarte. But some items carry with them special responsibilities. Just follow the contract, and you'll be fine.
Pet Shop of Horrors is a manga that is both anthology and ongoing story. It is the story of D, owner of an exotic pet shop in Chinatown. While the back of the manga calls him Count D, he admits that it is his grandfather who was the last count, but he simply is D. Step into his pet shop for something rare and priceless. Perhaps something not to be fed after midnight. No, seriously, he sells that. But of course he has quite a collection of other animals. For instance, the first story, Dream, tells of a rich girl who wishes to have a unique bird because of how her friend has one of their own. And so Dee presents to her a Strelitzia, a bird that, in the middle of the night, sings the most beautiful song of love and homesickness.
What's that, my children? That is a person and not a bird? I don't know what you're talking about. That is very clearly a bird, and it is a rare one at that. Just, be warned, don't walk in on the bird when it's trying to conceive a child with the female of its species. It can get messy.
And then there is the story of despair. This introduces Officer Arcot, a detective who has begun noticing a string of bodies appearing, whose only link is the pet store owned by Dee. The latest death was an actor whose star had faded, but he was still young and beautiful. He had a particular obsession with reptiles and lizards, and as such, Dee got him something special. A type of basilisk who wore a mask to conceal her eyes, for it was said that if you were to look into the eyes of this lizard, you would soon be dead. But what did happen to this poor actor? And how is it that the lizard was found dead beside him too?
And is it just me, or does the lizard actually look like Sailor Moon? I think it's the hair.
Our third tale is Daughter. A couple has recently lost their daughter Alice, and the two seek solace, something to fill the void her absence has created. Dee is more than happy to show them a very special rabbit. One who looks like their daughter did, apparently.
I say apparently because, well, I just see a little bunny rabbit.
But the thing about any pet, really, is that you should only feed it what's good for it. Otherwise, there might be consequences. The final story in Volume 1 is Drazen. In this case, instead of a couple losing their daughter, it is a daughter who lost her parents and her sight in a burglary and arson. Dee gets for her a Doberman named Drazen, who was formerly a military dog in the German military. Since there is fear that the burglar might try to kill her, Dee thinks that the dog will make an excellent bodyguard for her. On top of that, it seems that the young girl has inherited quite a fortune. How fortunate, then, that she has such a loyal companion when it seems that there is someone after her.
Pet Shop of Horrors' first volume is truly all about love in various ways, be it romantic love, fealty to one's friend, or the love of a parent for their child. And how love can be murder, my children! Hello, my children! A week ago, I told you of Simon Garth, the zombie. Well, he's not the only zombie who headlines comics. Let me introduce you to Zombo!
And what a bizarre little gruesome and grisly story have we got today. Zombo takes place in the far future, when humanity is expanding out into space and colonizing worlds left and right. They haven't found any intelligent alien life. But as it turns out, some planets themselves do not like having humans colonize them and fight back with sickeningly powerful plant life and animal life. However, some of these hostile worlds have created a new weapon to use against humanity: a zombie plague. They transform people into walking corpses, determined to bite and spread the infection to other humans in their continuing war against the people. Fortunately, the very trustworthy human government has created a new weapon against the zombies. He is Zombo! And he is a very polite walking dead man. Yes, he will devour flesh and likes to kill things, but he is very sophisticated about it. He asks nicely if he can eat you, and is perfectly okay if you say no, if a bit disappointed. But what is Zombo's story here? Well, a government ship, which happens to have civilian passengers because, well, budget cuts and all, crash lands onto a hostile alien world where its plant and animal life immediately begin murdering people in various horrible ways. Eventually, Zombo is released and manages to fight back against the world, destroying sea monsters, crashing ravens that communicate with the dead, and taming shadow beasts that would otherwise rend any life forms they come across. However, after fights with more creatures, and even some inbred cannibal people, the only survivors are Zombo and a civilian lawyer lady. Civilian lawyer lady heads out, not trusting Zombo, who is left to destroy the planet's weapons as best as he can. Eventually, he is rescued by weirdos who like to commit suicide, and then put the videos of their suicides up on DeathTube.
Get it? It's like YouTube, but about death. The satire is so clever, it astounds even me, my children.
And Zombo must join forces with the idiots to try to escape from the hostile world, which seeks to make more zombies in the outer worlds. Zombo is a bit of a strange beast, my children. It is very much dark humor, aka the best kind of humor, but at the same time it recognizes how really dark this sort of situation can be. For example, one of the crash survivors decides to kill himself rather than try to continue the search for safety, since he has seen so many of his fellows get killed off rather terribly. Zombo sticks in terrible pop culture references out of nowhere, but satisfies the blood and guts quite nicely, and at some points is even genuinely funny. It is a strange comic, but I like it.
The great thing about a name like Zombo is that you can add adjectives to the end, like he was a stage magician. Zombo the Magnificent! Zombo the Polite! Zombo the Hungry! Greetings from hell, my children! Do you notice how I always rise up when I begin speaking to you? It's almost like I'm coming up from the ground, from something down below, from the underworld itself, perhaps. What do you think would happen if, say, one day, hell decided to come to Earth?
Day of Judgment was a small event comic produced by DC that had a lot of repercussions. It was written by Jeff Jones, who became the writer of the Green Lantern for 9 years. That's a long time in comic books, my children. Some comics are lucky if they have a writer for a year, but this is where it truly began. Asmodel, a fallen angel, makes a deal with Etrigan the Demon to take possession of the Spectre. You remember the Spectre, don't you, my children? He's the albino in green underpants, who also happens to be the right hand of God. Well, Jim Corrigan, his host, is living happily in heaven. And since there's no earthly soul to ground the Spectre, Asmodel easily takes possession of the entity and goes on a rampage in hell, opening up the gates and sending all manner of demons onto the earth. The heroes of the DC universe quickly gather, its mystical heroes and villains putting aside their differences to try to stop the Spectre and the forces of hell. Their decision is easy. Go to heaven, get Jim Corrigan, and make him take possession of the Spectre again.
What, you think getting to heaven is difficult? I've been there, my children. Overrated. Not enough blood and guts for my taste. Still, Rocky L knows how to party.
But even if they get the Spectre under control, there's also the problem of all those demons running loose. As such, a second team is put together to go into hell and reignite its fire pits, which should hopefully drain all their little demons back to the hopeless realm. Up in heaven, Jim Corrigan says they're pretty much out of luck since he's at peace and crap. However, the heroes are directed to the realm of purgatory, where those not worthy of heaven, but not evil enough for hell, wait for judgment. It is there that they find Hal Jordan, former Green Lantern and former supervillain, who murdered the entire Green Lantern Corps, and then tried to reboot the universe at one time.
Although, considering how often comic universes reboot, would I have even noticed?
Point is, Hal Jordan is all too eager to get a shot at redemption. In hell, the team there gets to fight the three-headed Cerberus, fall into the river Styx, and fight the demonic creature Neberos before reigniting the fire pits and dragging the demons back to their realm. Hal Jordan makes a valiant effort against the Spectre, but the Spectre itself must choose who it gets to possess. Naturally, when Hal Jordan breaks down and admits that he deserves punishment for his crimes, the Spectre is more than happy to grant him that punishment by wearing its garb. It was a change that would lead to Hal Jordan's restoration to life, and as a Green Lantern several years later.
And all because of the most terrifying concept, my children, that the final punishment, hell itself, could be broken and its denizens set loose. Let that nightmare sit in your mind as you say your prayers. Hello, my children! Here is a brain teaser for you. What would you do if you had power over life and death? If you had the power to kill with a few strokes of a pen? This is the Death Note.
Death Note is the story of high school student Light Yagami. Light is feeling rather bored with life, the drudgery of being such a good student and smart and college-bound and icing all of his scores and being fawned over by attractive women. It's so tedious.
Girlfriend, I know how that feels, let me tell you.
But Light comes across something special one day, a Death Note. The Death Note is a tool by Shinigami, a god of death. All you have to do is write a person's name in the Death Note while thinking of their face to make sure you don't accidentally kill everybody with that name, and they will die of a heart attack. Unless you also write down a specific cause of death along with it, which you can be very specific about, as long as you get it down in the allotted time, of course. There are limits to it, though, as Light uses his intellect to test said limits. They must be physically possible deaths. You can't have someone teleport to another country and die there as you put down that a man in Japan dies in France a minute after you finish writing. It will just default to a heart attack where they are.
Don't you hate it when magical artifacts have been beta tested so you can't glitch them?
Light is guided about the use of the Death Note by Ryuk, the Shinigami who left it in the human world, because he was bored. Yes, it seems the Shinigami lead a very dull existence, which is only sustained by the deaths of humans. They can see when a person is supposed to die and end it prematurely, getting the remaining time for themselves. They have no interest in good or evil, right or wrong, simply extending their lives. And in this case, Ryuk simply wants something to entertain himself. And what does Light do with the Death Note? Why, he has decided that he shall make the world a better place. He kills criminals who deserve, in his mind, to die, whether they are in prison or not. And of course, people do notice that so many criminals are dying so quickly, and all of mysterious heart attacks. Light thinks that this will make the world a utopia, since people will be afraid to commit acts of evil if they know that someone is watching and ready to strike them dead. And thus an investigation is launched by Interpol and their secretive associate, simply named L. L is smart and cunning, able to deduce many things about Light. The popular press and the internet refer to the killer as simply Kira, based on his actions. And thus there is a battle of wits as Light attempts to hunt down L's identity so he can eliminate this threat to his utopia, and L can attempt to defeat this unrighteous killer.
Death Note is highly recommended, my children. The rules are firmly established. The characters are intelligent and cunning. and the morality is interesting to consider. Although such a thing would not work on me. You can't kill someone who's already dead! Greetings, my children! It seems even the capes and costume crowd want something a little more hellish now and then from their heroes. So thank goodness we have a motorcycle rider with a flaming skull for a head.
Ah, Ghost Rider, the most supernatural superhero of all. See, it says so in his first appearance. Is he alive or is he dead?
Is he a dot or is he a speck? When he's underwater, does he get wet?
All joking aside, I have to admit, Ghost Rider's origin story is kinda weird, my children. Johnny Blaze was born and raised in a traveling motorcycle show. His father is killed in a motorcycle accident, and soon after, his adoptive mother is mortally wounded in yet another motorcycle accident. She makes Johnny swear on her deathbed that she shall not ride the motorcycle, and he agrees. But for some reason he does not tell his adoptive father why he is refusing to ride, meaning everyone says he is a coward. Seriously, there is no reason at all why he can't just tell them his reasons. Instead, he does admit it to his girlfriend tearfully, and she seems to accept it. Until there is a big show at Madison Square Garden and he still refuses to ride. However, his luck with his parents is not over, for his adoptive father is diagnosed with the disease and he only has a month left. I don't know why they don't say cancer or something, it's just the disease.
This family really has a problem being specific with their issues, I see.
And despite knowing his reasons for not riding, the girlfriend still calls him a coward for not riding the big show. So naturally, Johnny Blaze has only one option before him. The devil! Yup, he decides to call up Satan and have him save his adoptive father from the disease.
What? It's exactly what I would do in this situation.
And so he pledges his soul to Beelzebub, but the father decides instead to gamble his life on a nearly impossible stunt, and gets killed for it. But hey, he didn't die of the disease, so Satan held up his end of the bargain. He places a curse on Johnny before his girlfriend interrupts and just shoos Satan away. Because she can do that. And thus every night when the sun vanishes, Johnny Blaze becomes the Ghost Rider. It's really as weird as that, my children.
But if you want to see for yourself, get the Marvelous Essentials volume, which collects not only his first appearances in Marvel Spotlight, but the first 20 issues of his solo series. 28 comics featuring Ghost Rider for only $17? I'd sell my soul for a deal that good. Eek, my children! No, it's not just a scream of terror, but the name of today's anthology of frights.
Eek comes to us from Australia, believe it or not. The company called Black House. Eek is a horror anthology, like so many others, based on the EC comics of yesteryear. Tales of unscrupulous individuals and their gory demises. This particular tome today is a collection of several issues of Eek. As such, to talk about every story would take far more time than my aged bones can handle. So let me just highlight a few of my favorites. We begin with, well, the very first tale in the book, Deadline of Death. Poor Randolph was a comic book artist who lived with his friend and rival Jake Elder. After getting rejected yet again, he learns that Jake has now earned himself a position at Marvelous Comics. As Jake's star rises, Randolph finds himself sinking deeper into the depths. And perhaps his only chance at fame and success lies with Satan in the depths of hell.
And thus Randolph became Ghost Rider. Wait, that was yesterday.
Take a bite out of this next story, wherein gluttonous food critic Sol Weinstein gobbles his way through restaurant after restaurant, enjoying himself some places, but leaving harsh criticisms that would give anyone indigestion. However, as his tastes become more and more exotic and ravenous, he travels around the world seeking a perfect dish. Until finally, his plane crashes, leaving him and a few others to survive. His ravenous hunger becomes too much for him, and he must eat up his fellow survivors. And even that is not enough. What could he possibly eat now that he could give a 5-star rating to? If you're looking to buy a home, I suggest you avoid the office of Horace Greeley in What's Down in the Basement, Horace Greeley. The crooked real estate agent does everything he can to devalue an otherwise fine property, so that the selling homeowners will see nary a dime as he sells them off and gets all the profit. Always be careful about your investments, though, my children. Sometimes houses themselves don't appreciate such disrespectful actions. And the last that I shall discuss is Death Wears Hot Pants. A waitress, disappointed that her biker brother has resumed selling drugs after saying he'd quit, finds herself a job where the others working there seem to be a bit rude, or at least not particularly friendly. When she travels up the stairs to her boss's office for a drink, she soon discovers the terrifying secret of the club, and her brother must attempt to rescue her. But is it too late for her? These are just a small sampling of the stories present, and I could have told you more, like of the intergalactic robber who forgot to count properly, the thrill killer who met his match, or even of the 2 door-to-door holy men who came face to face with the most dangerous of opponents. And the weirdest part about all of these stories, they were all written and drawn by one man.
Eek is retro horror bound to give you the creepies, my children. And when such terror tales all derive from the same mind, one really has to wonder what's wrong or right with such a mind. King hell, my children! Oh, such language! I apologize. A pity that today's tale from the Longbox does not know that curses are not a vitamin to be taken regularly, but a precision instrument. Then again, it is a curse that drives Terror Inc.
Terror is not only the name of an organization, but the man, well, corpse, who runs it. In the 5th century, he was a vandal who sacked Rome on more than one occasion, plundering and pillaging as he went. However, he was then forced to take on a hellish monster, and to his credit, he was able to kill the beast from the inside out, not realizing that a curse was put on him for doing so. His body is forever decaying, my children, and his only way of surviving is replacing his worn-out pieces with fresh parts. As long as a sufficient quantity of him remains, he is able to assimilate new pieces and rejuvenate himself. With a few setbacks, like assimilating knowledge from that piece. He needed to take brains in order to take memories or the like, but if a limb had a particular tick or did certain actions repeatedly, he could usually gain those skills. He is preserved mostly thanks to absorbing the arm of his dying lover, encasing it in mystical armor, and gaining with it a part of her soul that allows him to be a little nobler in his exploits. It should be noted that this version of Terror Incorporated is actually a reinvention of a Marvel comic of the same name. The original had its own backstory, but similar powers and abilities before it was cancelled in the early 90s. This reinvention was done for the Marvel Max comic line, with more quote-unquote adult language on situations, even some nudity for those who like to see boobs in the middle of a bloody, gory fight. Terror in this series runs a mercenary organization, usually pertaining to assassinations or the like. The plot of the miniseries pertains to Terror being hired by the US government to assassinate a traitor in Homeland Security. But of course he is betrayed, and his mission was false, just a ploy to kill Terror and take the metal-encased arm from him. The goal? To bring life to the leader of a terrorist nihilistic cult whose leader is said to be immortal and grant immortality to all. Assisting Terror is his associate Miss Primo, a devoting, skilled and intelligent woman who does what she can to aid Terror in his efforts. The story is quite enjoyable, my children, if only you can get past how dirty it is. You see, this is the kind of story that thinks that it is a Quentin Tarantino-directed tale. It is full of swearing and drugs and sex and violence, but it does not know how to properly utilize them. So really, after you finish reading it, you feel kinda dirty and you're not sure why you even bothered. If you can look past that though, it is the tale of a decaying zombie who saves America from a crazy cult lady.
Just remember, my children, be sure to not use any bad words too often, or you could end up like Terror. He had to get his mouth washed out with soap once, and it ended up falling off! Hello, my children! Did you know that you are descended from hundreds, if not thousands of people from history? Maybe their names are not all remembered, but all of your ancestors are important because they eventually made you. That being said, you probably aren't a descendant of Dracula.
Nicholas Harker's parents have recently died, and a lawyer named Miranda Hawthorne arrives to inform him of his inheritance, a vast fortune of money and possessions. She and her daughter, Jill, moved to Boston to help Nicholas during this time, and Jill and Nicholas become very close friends. As they inspect the contents of a warehouse of the inheritance, they discover a box with a locket inside. A locket that says, Everlasting, and which contains the spirit of Dracula, who possesses Nicholas.
Wait a second. A locket contains the spirit of the person that can re-enter the body, able to regenerate himself. Holy crap! Dracula was a Time Lord!
Nicholas has problems enough in school as he is attracted to a girl who is already dating someone else. But the spirit of Dracula haunts him in mirrors, encouraging him to let him take control and give him the confidence he doesn't have normally. Nicholas and Jill attempt to learn more about the locket by going to a fortune teller, but unfortunately, she senses the evil within it and tells them to leave. Later that night, Dracula returns to the shop and bites her neck to make sure she does not warn anyone, killing her. Her daughter Kate, however, begins investigating on her own and discovers that her mother was reading the Dracula novel before she died. Using magic, she conjures up the spirit of Bram Stoker, who confesses that the events of the novel were in fact reality, and all the people within it were real people, and their descendants live on. Some parts of the novel were embellished. For example, Renfield did not die in the real world, but bore children, one descendant of which now owns the asylum, and has taught his 4 sons to eagerly await Dracula's return. Kite suspects that a detective looking into the matter might be a descendant of the Van Helsing line, but she can find no evidence of this. Meanwhile, Dracula begins having his castle in England transferred to Boston brick by brick, so that his power might be maintained. Jill seems to be the only thing to keep Nicholas's hold on himself, but unfortunately, it's a tenuous hold, as Dracula continues to amass power over Nicholas's soul.
Dracula Everlasting could just be written off as yet another pretty boy vampire story, but trust me, the evil of Dracula remains, and it does not lose its roots to the monster that he is. Hello, my children. You know, my children, some say that fantasy and horror are mere escapism. Well, if it's mere escapism, how does the realm of the supernatural handle someone who is a legendary escape artist? These are the secret adventures of Houdini.
It is a short read at only 64 pages and only touches upon the supernatural, but it is there, my children. It is magical. Like Poe from last year, it is a loose version of the events of Houdini's life on set in 1923, after he has gotten much of his fame, accolades, and begun debunking those who claim to use legitimate supernatural forces to work miracles. It has been some time since the death of his mother, and his brother assists him when he can, while also being supported by his wife, Bess. We see various parts of his life, from his ability to take a punch from those who claim to be the strongest man in cities, to his death-defying escapes from water boxes and coffins, all the while maintaining his non-belief in the supernatural. A friend even tries to convince him that he is in communication with his long-dead mother, but that is obviously untrue when the message from the mother calls him by his stage name and expresses religious beliefs not her own. But if this story is all about him debunking the supernatural, why is it being featured here on the Longbox? Ah, my children, but that belief doesn't always hold true. For you see, one night while Houdini has infiltrated a satanic cult, he attempts to avert a human sacrifice that could give rise to their demonic master. He succeeds in defeating the cult, but in the course of it, one of the men is possessed by the demonic force. Faced with knowledge of the supernatural right in his face and trying to murder him, it seems the great skeptic and magician must learn that there is more to the world than he previously thought. How will Houdini escape from such foes that he did not even believe were real? How does he manage to cope with the new information before him? And can he escape from those stronger, faster, and more cunning than he? Well, the secret to any good escape is building suspense.
Magic, my children, is created by belief. Belief in things outside of what we see. Belief in the dark places we are afraid to walk. And belief in you, my children. I believe in you most of all. Welcome, my children! Last year, the very first episode of the Longbox showed you the more modern version of the House of Mystery. But back in 1991, the House of Mystery brought us many tales of ghouls and ghosts, including today's story, I, Vampire.
400 years ago, Andrew Bennett was a noble knight in Queen Elizabeth's court with his love Mary. One night, while going through a ride in the countryside, Andrew came across an old man who told him that his belief in a loving, just world was false, and tried to prove it by biting him and killing him. The image of his lady love managed to help him repel his vampiric attacker, but it was too late for him. The curse of the vampire was upon him, and he found himself needing to drink deer blood to sustain himself. When poor Mary discovered his secret, she asked to be transformed as well, so that the two could be together forever. Unfortunately, while Andrew had retained some semblance of his humanity when transformed, Mary embraced the base evils that being a soulless creature had brought with it. For 400 years, Andrew pursued Mary, or Mary Queen of Blood as she became known, across the world, always being 2 steps behind her. Now, in modern times, Mary has set up the Blood Red Moon Agency, her organization dedicated to some nefarious plot. Now aided by the Russian Nishkin, whose father was killed by Mary and his mother transformed into a vampire too, and the lovely Deborah Dancer, Andrew continues his efforts to dispose of his love. They are a formidable bunch. Andrew's own vampire strength and abilities, Mishkin's wisdom and experience, and Deborah's fighting skills make for an impressive group to fight vampires. In the inaugural 5 parts of their story, they travel from New York to California, disrupting Mary's group wherever they come across them. They stop a vampiric drug dealer who, thanks to feeding off addicts, has become as addicted to heroin as he has to blood. They stop a racist political party influenced by Mary and save the children of a black senator from the Ku Klux Klan. They destroy a vampire who has betrayed his Buddhist master, whose entire temple had also become vampires, but had maintained their own humanity thanks to their beliefs in balance and Zen. And during all of this, Andrew struggles with himself over his identity. Is he man or monster? Can he still serve God when the devil has infected him so? Will he ever make up for what he had unknowingly done to his beloved Mary? And for that matter, can he stop Mary before she unleashes her hellish designs upon the world?
I, vampire, ask the questions that modern so-called good vampires have been asking themselves in fiction years before they graced pen and screen. Check it out sometime, my children, and beware the dawn of the living undead. Die long and prosper, my children! Star Trek is a series that is best known for its embrace of science and logic and fact. Oh, but did you know that sometimes they run into things a bit spookier?
While these comics deal with issues relating to hauntings and spooks, it's not like the original series never dealt with such things. In fact, Star Trek had a Halloween episode where they encountered ghosts, wizards, black cats, spells, skeletons, and all that fun stuff. The episode, Cat's Paw, is considered a rather stupid episode by most people, but of course, how could I ever hate such a thing, where 3 ghostly witches yell at Captain Kirk and crew to leave?
Spock. Comment. Very bad poetry, Captain.
The crew of the Enterprise is transporting an alien criminal back to his homeworld. He is an unusual being, dedicated to not returning to his homeworld. And he has no eyes, so he detects things as a bat would, using sonar. After an escape attempt, he is rendered unconscious, but the crew begins experiencing strange phenomena. A werewolf appears before 2 lovers, and then disappears. A ghostly apparition appears before Chekhov and Sulu while they are fencing.
Get your minds out of that gutter, children!
And it disappears after they try to shoot it. However, one presence appears on the bridge that the crew are not expecting at all. Dracula himself! And unlike the spirits who vanished, this Dracula manages to toss aside those who try to subdue him. He transforms into a bat and then mist, escaping into the ship. It attacks an alien ambassador who was the escort of the prisoner, biting his neck before a young ensign was able to slay the dread vampire with a phaser on kill.
So if Van Helsing or Zorro or anybody else had just had a laser gun, he could have taken out Dracula permanently? Good to know.
The strangest of their encounters, however, is none other than a giant haunted house that appears in their path, just sitting in space. In the haunted house, they find none other than Frankenstein's monster attacking a woman. Kirk even fights the monster hand to hand. After defeating the creature, more apparitions appear around them, but a new threat makes itself known quickly. Klingons! They kidnap Spock, hoping to gain secrets of the Enterprise's new warp engines. Using advanced technology, a captured film archivist, and the talents of the alien prisoner, they have been projecting false images onto the ship, which are slowly gaining strength as stray hydrogen atoms are combined to create more realistic beings.
Yup, makes total scientific sense.
The haunted house? A reconfigured space station, of course. The blonde woman, as it turns out, was also a creation of the man, an image of his dead wife. With Spock's help, the man is able to send the projections back upon the Klingons, sending the terrors out to attack them and save everyone.
Science prevails, my children! But consider for a moment that the man kidnapped was a horror film archivist. Even in the utopian future of Star Trek, there is room for the terrifying. Hello, my children. So today's comic from the Longbox is by Junji Ito, the same writer and artist of Uzumaki. I figured that this would be the same kind of terrifying tale that we are used to there. Well, it sort of is.
Do you remember how Uzumaki will sometimes have really weird stories that aren't scary, like the hair fight? Yeah, Gyo feels like one of those, but it's been expanded into an entire manga. This is Gyo, the Death Stench Creeps. Just to repeat that, my children, the Death Stench Creeps. Would you like to know what it's about? A foul odor and fish with spider legs.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, my children. This one is kinda weird.
Teenagers Tadashi and Kaori are at a resort in Okinawa, with Tadashi in particular enjoying some diving when he is almost attacked by sharks. When he and Kaori return to shore, she complains about the foul smell of the place, especially his bad breath. She insists that he brush his teeth any time before they kiss. She keeps taking showers, trying to remove a smell she can't pinpoint, but is unsuccessful. However, that night the two discover a fish very speedily moving around their room on skittering legs. Tadashi seems to kill it and put its body in a trash bag, but then later the bag is crawling around their room, even managing to stab him despite his continued efforts to mutilate the creature before finally letting it go out to sea. Kaori gets a fever from all her showerings, while Tadashi spots more of the monster fish emerging from the water. In a short time, thousands of the walking fish begin emerging from the sea, but with added dangers. Land sharks!
Which I have to admit, yeah, that's pretty freaking scary.
Hell, they even have tendrils that are going into their gills, which probably are involved with allowing the sharks to breathe out of the water. Fortunately, the two manage to escape back to Tokyo, where, conveniently, Tadashi's uncle can shed some light on the creatures, most especially that the legs are not extensions of the fish, but rather that they are a mechanism, combined with a foul-smelling gas that had been intended for use during World War II as chemical warfare, but whose prototypes had believed to be destroyed. Unfortunately, the spider-like mechanisms have a tendency to latch onto anything close to them, as the poor uncle soon learns when it grabs his arm. I admit that while the story is very strange, it is quite horrifying, as you'd expect from Junji Ito. Body horror abounds, particularly to poor Kaori, as the germs in the gas begin to infect her form. And the idea of sharks marks walking around on land on metallic feet means that you cannot simply close the beaches or stay out of the water. That being said, there is still one significant problem with the story. Kaori is one of the most irritating protagonists ever. Tadashi is a freaking saint, my children. He puts up with her constant nagging, constant screaming, constant critiques and insults, and even when her body becomes bloated by the gas, he's still trying to save her life and carries her around in desperation. And all she can do is be pissed off that he doesn't try to fight a freaking shark.
If you can get past the very bizarre premise, my children, Gyo has its frights to be found. And remember, if by chance you happen to be eating fish sticks for lunch, be sure the fish isn't still crawling around. I bid you welcome once again, my children. There came a time when the much-hated comics code finally began to collapse. It was 1971 when writers could once more use the word vampire in their books, and Marvel took full advantage in 1972, bringing on a 70-issue Dracula series, The Tomb of Dracula.
I have read that the early issues lacked direction, and the first issue felt more like it was based on Universal horror movies. But to be frank, I feel this more reflects the Hammer Dracula films, my children, with the exception of a lack of gore. But the gothic environment and the characterizations feel all too much like the Christopher Lee Dracula films. But enough about movies, we are here about comics. And in Tomb of Dracula #1, we meet Frank Drake, a descendant of Dracula who has fallen on hard times. He had inherited much wealth and squandered it foolishly. Most of his friends had turned their backs on him, leaving him with nothing but an old family castle in Transylvania. Traveling there with his girlfriend Jeannie and her ex-boyfriend Clifton, they hope to transform the castle into a tourist attraction. Clifton, however, has designs of his own, hoping to win back his lady's love after he has murdered Drake. The townspeople, still fearful of Dracula and his castle, naturally are afraid to bring the travelers there, much as they would also like to see some revenue from the tourism business. That night, while inspecting the castle, Clifton falls down a rotted floor and enters into the titular Tomb of Dracula. Discovering Dracula's corpse and the wooden stake contained within, he mocks the entire idea of Dracula's vampirism and pulls the stake from his bones. And of course, my children, that only results in Dracula's awakening. He kills Clifton and goes after Drake and Jeannie. Drake only manages to hold off Dracula with a silver compact and by informing Dracula of his heritage to the king of vampires. However, he is too late to save Jeannie, who is bitten by the Dark Lord and transformed into a vampire herself. She escapes into the night, leaving poor Clifton with the ruins of the castle. Ah, yes, see, the townspeople, upon discovering a dead body with bite marks on her neck, decided to not waste any time, formed a mob, and set the castle ablaze. I admit, my children, you have to admire their efficiency in such things. Though frankly, that does make me wonder why the hell they didn't just do that to begin with.
Frank Drake would find more allies over the course of the series' run. Hell, it's even considered in canon with the Marvel Universe. Dracula himself encountered Spider-Man. Now there's a thought, my children. Dracula versus Spider-Man. Nice to see you again, my children. Last year, we discussed the exploits of Cassie Hawk and her partner Vlad as they slashed slashers left and right. Well, we're at it again in Volume 2.
Oh, where to begin, my children? The problem with looking at an omnibus is that there are simply so many stories to behold. We could start from the beginning, the very beginning, wherein we see Cassie Hawk's origins, about her wicked mother who killed the boys that bullied her and boiled them in her kitchen. Or perhaps we should simply follow up on the dangers of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, where a small band performing in bars made a deal with demonic creatures from another world to get the fame and power they desired, as long as they continue to sacrifice virgins. And it would seem that our heroes fit the bill quite a bit. We can check in on some old allies of Cassie and Vlad as they try to make a new life for themselves after their battle with Chucky. Or maybe we should take another look at the evil priest Father Wrath, who seems to have returned. And yet he finds himself in the Archie-esque environment of squeaky clean high schoolers and their problems of finding a date to the spirit dance, or accidentally having too many dates for the dance. Now that is terrifying. Or perhaps in between stories, we can see Cassie having to sacrifice one thing she loves so that she can help another thing that she loves. Ah, poor Cassie Hawk. She has so many problems with her life. She sees herself as a freak who kills other freaks. She cannot settle down in a normal life, but she desires the kind of companionship that Vlad cannot provide her. And she truly realizes this as she goes to a school where a lesbian cult is sacrificing their blood in the hopes of achieving immortality, only it is actually an insane shape-shifting woman who also encountered Vlad and Cassie before. You know, it happens like that. And as Cassie and Vlad travel across the United States, destroying slashers as they come across them, they also search for Cassie's father, long missing, but clues have begun to mount up. Clues that eventually lead them to Dr. Herbert West, the Reanimator. And he has some very special plans for Cassie's long-dead mother.
Hackslash continues its tradition of finding imaginative new slasher villains, and a few old ones, and the imaginative ways of paying them back for their murderous ways. Who's strong and brave here to save the American way? Captain America, my children! What? Just because I don't usually like the capes and costume crowd doesn't mean I hate them all. And who doesn't like Captain America? Except for maybe those who aren't American. Anyway, the point is, The Haunting of Skull House!
Republished here in a trade called Ghost Stories, we find the patriotic hero facing ghosts both recent and long dead. The day is Halloween, and Captain America is returning to the mansion stronghold of his greatest enemy, the Red Skull. Some time ago, the Red Skull had kidnapped Captain America and his closest friends. He wanted to finally get his vengeance upon him, while he still had a brief time left of his own worn-out existence. He subjected Captain America to artificial aging and then poisoned both the hero and himself, determined that they would die in battle together. However, the Captain survived, and the Red Skull's final sight was of Captain America standing over him in victory. And now Cap, having heard reports of lights and activity within the abandoned mansion, has come on this day to investigate. And even before he enters, he has a twinge of fear. He does not believe in ghosts and hauntings and other supernatural things. And yet this old dark house has all the traditional markings of a ghostly inhabitant. Although his fear stems not from apparitions, but his memory.
After all, what is a ghost if not just a bad memory that refuses to be forgotten?
However, the ghosts may have more reality than he bargained for, since an image of the Red Skull appears and talks to him. Still not believing his eyes, Captain America ponders the possibilities. A hologram? A robot? and yet it knows so much about him, about his final confrontation, and most especially about a fairly recent sin the captain has committed, killing a guard of a terrorist organization. That particular tragedy haunts the captain far more than the Red Skull. However, the Red Skull also claims to now be an agent of a higher power, for it seems that when the captain exposed himself to the sin of murder, evil was let into his soul, and as a cosmic balancing act, a sliver of good was put into the Red Skull, and now the only freedom for the captain's soul is death. Unfortunately, my one critique of this tale is that we learn far too soon that this whole thing is actually a plot by another enemy of Captain America named Dr. Faustus, a mad psychiatrist. Such a fact should have been left for the ending and kept the audience guessing. Or perhaps there is still guessing to be had. For you see, Dr. Faustus really should not have used the Red Skull's home for his revenge.
Tomorrow brings us Halloween, my children. I hope you have all lain your own ghosts to rest before you try to play a trick-or-treat. Happy Halloween, my children! Last year, on this most momentous of days, I told you the tale of Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Well, that comic was so popular, it got itself a sequel! This is Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, the Nightmare Warriors!
Unfortunately, it is not as good as the first one. I blame this mostly on the inconsistent artwork, my children. At points it is quite good and is similar to the artwork for the first. But a lot of fill-ins and bad artists worked on the in-between issues, leading a lot of people looking very much like each other, and the horrific elements are not as glorious as they should be. Still, the story is epic in scope, and would have served as an excellent conclusion to all three franchises that make up this crossover. Several months after the events of Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, Ashley Williams is living a peaceful life with Carrie, the other survivor of that story. Unfortunately, the United States government has arrived back at Camp Crystal Lake to take the Necronomicon back with them to Washington, D.C. They wish to use the power of the Book of the Dead to defend America. The government doing something monumentally stupid? What a ridiculous idea! Freddy is very much still around though, and has now fully embraced the power of the Necronomicon. As such, he dispenses Jason to go kill Ash as revenge, but he only succeeds in killing poor Carrie. Now on the run, Ash meets up with Maggie Burroughs, Freddy's estranged daughter, who is working with Neil from Nightmare on Elm Street 3. What are they doing? Why, they have brought together all the survivors of Freddy and Jason's rampages to hopefully put a stop to the two once and for all. Unfortunately, things do not go well, for it seems Maggie has actually embraced her father's wicked ways and truly become the daughter of Freddy Krueger, wearing a glove of razor blades and, making out with her father. Did I mention that Freddy Krueger is kind of messed up? Understandably, people are upset about this plot turn, since it turns a character who was good evil, but for the purposes of the story, it is a good twist. Freddy had her gather all the survivors because he wanted to absorb the survivor power that they seem to possess. Stuff like Tina's telekinesis, Alice the Dream Master's power, and young Tommy Jarvis's... well, he wants nothing from him. He brought him into things because Jason wants Tommy. And Freddy wants Stephanie, the now grown-up baby relative of Jason Voorhees, to follow in Jason's legacy. As Freddy's powers grow, he unleashes the might of the Necronomicon onto Washington, D.C., letting an army of Deadites storm the United States Capitol. How will Ash and the other survivors make it through this? How can Freddy be stopped forever? Well, I won't reveal it for you, but interestingly enough, the solution actually comes from one of the rejected scripts for the original Freddy vs. Jason, so kind of clever there.
And with that, my children, it is once more time for me to return from whence I came. Be good to one another while I am gone. Play some tricks and earn some treats. And until the next time, enjoy the lives that you have. And look into the long box once in a while.